Over the last several episodes, we've gone underground together. We've traced a miner's day through the Orphan Girl mine, following the path he would have taken into the workings, guided more by memory than sight. Senses turned to the dark, the turns and the narrowing spaces where work began. We've also stepped forward in time, listening to modern voices talk about mining as it exists today. Its economics, its science, its risks, and its responsibilities. But between the mine and the modern debate, there is something else. There is the town. To understand Butte, not just how it mined, but how it endured, we have to come back above ground. We have to walk the streets where families lived, where children grew up, where loss was absorbed quietly into daily life. Today, we step into Hell Roarin Gulch at the World Museum of Mining. Not as nostalgia, not as decoration, but as context. This is the space between the mine and the world.
Butte was never just a mining camp. Across the West, plenty of camps flared up and burned out within a generation. But Butte didn't. It settled in. It layered itself. It learned to hold weight. Economic, physical, human. Hell Roarin Gulch shows us what that looked like. A barber shop with a cracked mirror worn thin by decades of faces. A post office shaped by waiting and routine. A schoolhouse with children learning their letters under the constant presence of industry. Churches where grief was folded into prayer. Saloons that stayed open because the mines never truly slept. And beyond that, the brothels, the gaming halls, the boarding houses packed tight with immigrant families trying to make something permanent out of uncertainty. This was a place of contradiction, piety and sin, hope and despair, families and loneliness. Mining didn't end at the shaft collar. It followed people home, onto wooden sidewalks, into kitchens, into beds that stayed empty when men did not come back. But there was another reason Butte didn't empty out. The ore demanded it. Neither company nor miner could escape the reality beneath their feet. As we've heard from miners, engineers, and industry leaders, geology dictates resources. The metals our world depend on are not what we wish them to be, but where the earth put them. That reality made Butte the richest hill on earth, not as a metaphor, but as a fact. The copper was too rich, too deep, too valuable to abandon. Companies stayed because the rock insisted on being worked. And where the companies stayed, people followed, building lives around a body of ore that refused to be left alone.
Above it all hung the smoke. Not the smoke of comfort or warmth, but the acrid smoke of roasted ores. The sharp, metallic bite of sulfur and arsenic released as rock was broken down for profit. The residue of smelting, the dirty, necessary business of bringing rock to the surface and forcing it to give up what it held. This was the visible mark of extraction. Ore was hauled up, crushed, roasted, processed, and the byproducts didn't disappear. They drifted, they settled, they worked their way into lungs, clothing, and homes. The smelter in Anaconda was meant to move some of that smoke away, just far enough to keep the mines running. But for generations, Butte lived beneath its effects. The haze blurred the line between day and dusk. It coated window sills and laundry lines. It became part of the landscape. This was the cost of work. The smoke wasn't abstract. It moved through open windows. It lingered in schoolyards and backyards. It carried the unmistakable smell of industry, doing exactly what it was designed to do. But the smoke also meant wages. It meant the hoist was running. The ore was coming up. The mills were turning. Families endured the fumes because smoke meant paychecks, and paychecks meant survival. In Butte, prosperity and harm arrived together. They always had.
If the mines powered Butte's economy, it was the women who stabilized its life. They buried husbands and sons, lost to accidents, cave-ins, or silicosis, the miners' consumption that stole breath and time. They took in boarders. They ran kitchens and laundries. They kept households functioning when grief threatened to overwhelm everything else. They stretched paychecks that never went far enough, and then stretched them again. They raised children in a town shaped by danger, routine, and endurance. And the question still lingers, why didn't they leave? Why stay in a place so demanding, so unforgiving? The answer may have been hope, or loyalty, or simply the reality that starting over somewhere else wasn't possible. Whatever the reason, their staying is why Butte remains when so many other camps vanished.
Hi there, Jeanette Koff, and we're here with Kelly Hazlett today with Drifts and Tales to talk a little bit about women in Butte and Butte history. You never know where our conversation's going to take us. So Kelly, first, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm the director of tourism from Butte, but I'm also a hobby historian, I guess you would call me. So I study the foodways of Butte, women in Butte, and then just kind of a general overall history to help people when they come visit me.
Exactly. And you know quite a bit. So we were talking in a chamber meeting a while back, which is what struck Dan and I about having you come in and talk a little bit about the role that women played in Butte. And so when we talk about women's labor in Butte, the story is so much broader than domestic work or caregiving. How do you frame the full spectrum of women's roles in a mining town like Butte?
Pioneering. Women that moved to the West were pioneers. They came here and they were, looking for a better life for themselves, for their family. And sometimes it would end in tragedy with the husband passing away and then the women having to take over the role of being not only the breadwinner, but finding ways to survive for mostly a gaggle of children. So a lot of women, if their husbands passed away, went to the cabbage patch, and built a home there, and then either some of the children would go into the mines or she would go find work herself.
So you mentioned the cabbage patch. For the viewers that aren't familiar with Butte, can you tell me just a little bit about what the cabbage patch is?
The cabbage patch is a place where women, when their husbands died, they would go to live down there. It was kind of small little houses built with newspaper. You would have to fit yourself and 15 children in there. And that's one of the larger examples, but it was survival. Most of the women, when their husbands died, didn't own the house or the rental. They couldn't afford to keep up with the costs. Yeah. So it became very, the cabbage patch, women took care of each other, and that's how they survived, is they built little houses with their children, and then they lived there.
And that seems to be a recurring theme that we've been coming across doing the Drifts and Tales, and of course working at the museum, and I'm sure you run across it as director of tourism, and in your studies, both with food and everything else, is taking care of each other. Butte takes care of its own because everybody was forced to.
Yeah. What's great about the Butte community and what it keeps going on is that we take care of one another. Mm-hmm. That's a huge part of Butte history, and it continues on today. When, say, a group of neighbors got together, the women would garden, they would share their produce, people would be taking care of other people's children while the mother sometimes had to go to work or the father had to go to work, and they needed extra help. We are a community of survivors, and to do that, we work together to, whoever had more would share with the less. And I think that's such an important part, and women played a huge part in that, especially with the red light district and women taking care of the children, women taking care of women in the cabbage patch, and women taking care of each other in the neighborhoods of Uptown Butte. So it's a very ingrained portion of Butte.
A town isn't defined only by catastrophe. It's defined by repetition, by choosing to keep going. Miners could come and go, but families stayed. They built neighborhoods, one boarding house at a time, one church basement, one shared meal. They built schools, parishes, and routines that absorbed risk and loss into something livable. Hell Roarin Gulch captures that balance, the grit required to survive, and the grace required to care for one another while doing it.
After hearing miners underground, industry leaders above ground, and experts debated mining's future, Hell Roaring Gulch reminds us of something essential. Mining is never just technical. It's never only economic. It reshapes towns, families, generations, because geology dictates where resources exist and human lives form around that reality. The World Museum of Mining doesn't just preserve artifacts. It preserves memory. It holds the space between what was extracted and what was lived, are rooted right here in the people who stayed.
A town is more than its disasters. It's the people that hold it together. Butte still does.
Butte didn't fade away. It adapted. It absorbed. It remains.
Thank you for spending time with us in Hell Roarin Gulch. Every building here, every worn floorboard and weathered doorway carries the weight of the people who lived this history. The miners who worked beneath the ground, the families who held the town together above it, and the women whose stories were pushed to the edges but never disappeared.